Hello and welcome to episode 83 of the DX Mentor, DX Hints and Tips. If this is the first time you're joining us, welcome. We have a back catalog covering many aspects of DX in both podcast and YouTube format. Please check us out. If you like what you find, please subscribe. You can also like and share to always be notified about upcoming events. Another way to keep in touch and to see what we're up to is via the DX Mentor Facebook page. I will be posting about upcoming podcasts as well as other DX events, so please follow us. This episode will be slightly different than our usual episodes. I recently gave a presentation on hints and tips for DXing for finding, working, and confirming DX. I received a lot of positive feedback and questions. Joe, WAGEX, and I thought that it might be something that you would be interested in. So we're going to go over a variety of topics and hope that you will familiarize yourself with a few and send us a few that we did not consider and maybe correct us on a few other ones. We have over 100 years of DXing between us, so I hope we're able to share some solid DX information with you. I would love to hear from you, though. So let's get started. Well, good evening and welcome to the latest edition of the DX Mentor. I'm Bill, age 8B. We're going to take a little bit of a different tack tonight, and I know you're going to enjoy it. Several months ago, I was asked to speak at a DX convention in Western Kentucky, and I came up with some slides that discussed some of the tips and tricks that I'd learned over the years about DXing, and I've frankly learned them mostly from three guys, WAGEX, K4ZLE, and KDV. Those guys taught me a lot, as well as K1FJ and KTWE. So there's my five in the background, if you will. But I got Joe with us tonight again, WAGEX. So I'd like to just go over some hints and tricks and tips for DXers, and let's get Joe's comments on them. So Joe, introduce yourself, and then we'll get started.
Well, I'm Joe, WAGEX, been around since um, I was a teenager, to be honest, as an SWL, and then got my license, got on 6 meters, got on all the bands eventually, and finally moved out here in the country on 25 acres and got a big antenna farm and just love DXing. So, Bill, why don't you start some of this and let's see what we can get into tonight?
All right. Well, I kind of made a list of in order if I were starting DXing again. And can you see the slide okay, Joe?
Yes.
Okay, and you won't need to see the slide, folks. We're going to make sure of that, but it helps if you want to watch it on YouTube. But I've kind of made a list of things and just want to talk about each one and have Joe check in on it. But the first topic we're going to cover is logging software, which I think is really important. And the thing about the logging software for me is I want to make a couple points. I'm going to talk about something called DX Lab. Now, this is not an ad for DX Lab. The software's free, so there's no one benefiting from me talking about it. But there's a huge support community for it. You know, thousands of guys that provide help and give responses. And it was originally designed and written by Dave Bernstein, AA6YQ. He is the of LOTW fame. He's an IBM fellow. The guy knows what he's doing when it comes to software, and he's put this together, and it's really terrific. The thing I like about it is that is a group of integrated applications. So if you want to start out with just logging software, you can do that. If you wanted to control your rig, you can do that. It can send Morse code and RIDI and all those things. It has a map, a gray line map. I couldn't think of it. But it also has a couple interesting tools we'll talk about in a second here.
Huh.
And as I said, it is free. In my case, I use it to control my flex. I use it to control my rotor. Of course, it does logging. It does something called DX collection and aggregation, which I'll talk about in a minute. I use it for RIDI contests. Sometimes you can do propagation prediction with it, which I'll touch on. It automatically uploads to Logbook of the World, Club Log, QRZ.com, and EQSL. You can generate custom reports, and it has something called real-time award tracking. So I would encourage you that if you're trying to pick a software for logging, check out DX Lab. There would be no impact if you download it and try it. It's free. I mean, there is no trial period or anything else. And if you didn't like it, there's several other really excellent packages like N3FJP and stuff like that. So, but I want to get into one of the features of DX Lab that really has helped me, especially in November and December. because now is the time if you're chasing an award that is an annual award like CQ Marathon, or maybe you're chasing IOTA or something. They have a real-time award tracking grid that pops up. And you can double click on a country maybe in the spot window or type it into the window because you've heard them. And it will tell you, for instance, if you need it for DXCC and if you do what band and what mode and have you verified it? Have you confirmed it? Have you only worked it but not confirmed it? So there's a ton of information. WPX, WAZ, WAS, just everything you could want to know about that particular call sign or that entity, you can get at your fingertips. So from that standpoint, I have this on all the time. And this weekend, for instance, I heard the Vatican on 20 meters, and I don't have the Vatican on 20 meters, and I knew that instantly because my reporting software told me, but also the real-time award tracking told me that as well. I wasn't able to get them, but it does tell me that. So it's a really, really cool tool. The other thing, Joe, that you're probably familiar with are spots, and I'm
Yes.
about to talk about how I do spots, but how did you used to do spots?
Well, you, excuse me, years ago, we had our main spotting network, believe it or not, was on 146.58 simplex. So everyone in the Cincinnati Dayton area, and I would say there's probably at least 25 of us, we monitored 146.58. And if we heard a DX station on, we would just pick up the hand mic and broadcast that North Korea is on 20 meters and the frequency. And then all the guys that were available sitting in the shack had the radio on. They would get on and try to work North Korea. So that's what we did for several years before we came up with all this new sophisticated stuff, Bill.
Well, when I was in high school, way, way back when, in the late 70s, some of us in Cincinnati had a calling rotation. So we weren't on 2 meters yet. We were picking up the phone, and you had a little list, and you had a list of what somebody needed. So if they needed P5, for instance, I had three guys to call, and each one of them had three guys to call. And about the third time I got a call, or 2 or 3 in the morning, my dad said, "That's it. I love chasing DX as much as anybody, but that's it." So,
Yes.
that made all the difference. Um, so in DX Lab, one of the things I like, again, not pitching DS Lab, just talking about some features. Um, it does something called spot aggregation. So what you can do is you can put 4 spot sources in there. So maybe it's dxsummit.fi, maybe it's W9RE, maybe it's VE7CC. You put 4 spot sources in there, and then it sorts them and it will put them together. So you're not getting 4 spots, for instance, for 3Y0RY. You'll get one, but it will always give you the latest and greatest. So it sorts it by time received, and all the information associated with it. And then, of course, in the window, you can double click. It will move to that frequency. You can right click and tell it to turn the antenna. So it'll do all those things. What I really like about it is that I can tell it that I only want spots from the Midwest, because the fact that England can hear, Peter the First Island loud and clear doesn't help me at all. Frankly, the fact that California can hear it doesn't help me at all.
Yes.
So you're able to use this tool to really hone down or hone in on, if you will, where the spots are coming from. And it does a good job of determining, is it an originated spot or just a forwarded spot. So if it's a forwarded spot, it won't count it. But if it originates in the Midwest, then it will count it. On top of it, it will actually send a text to your phone. And I use that religiously until HamAlert. And once I went to HamAlert, I stopped using this for that functionality, but it will allow you to do that. One thing it does is it keeps a rolling history. I usually keep a 30-day history. You can keep as much as you want, but the trade-off is disk space. But let's say in our example tonight, I'm trying to work Singapore. What I can do is I can go into the database and say, show me any spots from my area for Singapore. So it will show me that this one was maybe from Northern Ohio and this was one from Northern Kentucky. So I know those were 2 spots at a particular time on a particular frequency from my region. And again, that makes a big difference because I kind of really don't care what Nevada's seeing. It's a lot more important to me what Northern Kentucky might be seeing. So it
Yes.
keeps all that information. Another tool I mentioned a minute ago is HamAlert. KADV turned me on to HamAlert. We were literally standing in the parking lot at Cracker Barrel, and it was cold. And he's got his phone out showing this to me. And all of a sudden, it was like, oh, it went from 21 degrees to about 80. This is fine. Tell me more. Tell me more. So, HamAlert is a free tool, and you load your what you need in it, and it uses a number of different sources, and it does allow you to say what source do you want it from, and it is a smartphone app, so it runs on your smartphone, and it is excellent. I've not seen a bug with it yet. It works solidly, and it's I've been able to put a few in the log that I wouldn't have known were there. So
So,
HamAlert. Go ahead, Joe.
so Bill, on HamAlert, is there how many can you put in your alert system?
You could, when it starts, if you just say include all, it puts all 340 DXCC
Oh,
entities in it. Yeah. So then, and then you end up whittling it back. But
yes.
what's cool is you can set up a couple of different streams. So right now I have 12 that I need. I've never worked before. I think it's 12. So I have one setup that runs all the time, and it's the 12 that I need. And anytime one of those 12 is on the air from this region, I get a text. I'm sorry, the app goes off.
App goes off.
The
Sure.
second thing I have is for 6 meters. So anytime something is spotted for anything on 6 meters, I get a notice because I don't really have anything going on 6 meters, and I'm trying to get with that band.
So
Then
what type of alert do you really get?
you get if you get it from a DX spotting network, you'll hear Morse code, DX, dotted it, dotted it on. If you tell it to use the reverse beacon network, which you can, it will do RBN in Morse code. And then it's on your phone, you click, and then it comes up with all the information. Here's who it is, here's where they were spotted, here's the time.
Sure.
It's really good. It's easy to set up. We can do it someday if you'd like. It's really good. So that's my logging software thing. And again, if you're new to DX or you're looking for something different, I would check out DX Lab. I also know, though, being at SEDCO one year, I did a presentation on N3FJP, and they are just wonderful people. They support that product really well. It's cheap. I mean, it's 40 or $50, I think, for a annual or a lifetime subscription, and you get contests and stuff. If I weren't using DX Lab, that'd absolutely be with N3 FJP. So I'd encourage you to look at that. So, Joe, let's talk about something that you probably don't remember this, but in 1984 or 85, you and K4ZLE a couple times, I was this little kid on the block, and you were the sage old timers who were, pretty much sitting back and smoking the pipe and telling us how we needed to work DX. But both of you are kind of like splits and filters. You've got to know your rig. You've got to know what's going on. And so when we talk about split operation, we're talking about transmitting on a different frequency than you're receiving. So Joe, you've been on so many huge de-expeditions. How important is for me trying to contact you to make sure that I'm in the clear?
Oh, that's absolutely essential. So on a good D expedition or the average D expedition, we'll split 5 to 10 up. And in most D expeditions, that will pretty much cover the pile up. But if you get on something that's really rare, then it could go up 5 to 15, 5 to 20. I have heard them as much as 5 to 25, but that's sort of rare. But you really need to know your rig, how to split. And I have two receivers in mine, so I'm always listening to the DX station on one receiver, and then the other one is up to band, let's just say 5 to 10. And I'm tuning around up there trying to figure out who was the last person that the operator worked. And that's where I want to be.
So tell me about that. You're trying to figure out the last person the guy worked. Why are you doing that? And then what do you do when you have that?
Well, usually what I do, if I hear him sign with uh, Alpha Japan 8 Bravo, then as soon as he lets up and says QRZ, then I will call. But then sometimes the operator is going to move frequency so that he tries to hear someone so it's not such a huge pile up or just a huge heterodyne that he's listening to. So it's nice to try to figure out, is he going up every time or is he going down? He may go up to 15, and then start back down at 5 and go up, or he may start at 15 and just work himself down increments, trying to hear the loudest station.
Well, you gave me a piece of advice one time, and that was, if you're not having any luck, it doesn't do good to sit here and just call. So there's several times I'll go to wherever the last caller I can hear is, and I'll go up about a KC above that. And
Yes.
there's like nobody around it, but you call a couple times. I've been really surprised because I'm sure. So can you kind of explain what that wall of DX sounds like when you're sitting on Midway or Swains or?
Well, it would be like sitting in a, Texas Roadhouse restaurant. And to me, because I wear two hearing aids, those that restaurant is very, very noisy. I like noisy. I like the food, but not the noise.
Yeah.
But that is a good example. And you try to hear someone at the other end of that restaurant. Well, it's just next to impossible. So what I always tell people is to get up out of that pile up. If you have a pan adapter, you can see where everyone's calling and then get on the edge of that calling and place your call. Or if he's going up 5 to 15, for example, then go up 11 or 12 and sit there and call, because in most cases you'll be in the absolute clear. And a good DX operator is not going to stop at 15, for example. He or she is going to go up slightly above that to 11 or 12 and then back down again. So that always works for me.
Okay. I have an index card. I don't see it in front of me, but so if I'm tracking somebody, I will write down like the three digits, like 313, 315, 317, because it becomes very obvious where his next one's going to be. And I don't want to rely on my memory while I'm in the
Yes,
middle of changing VFOs and everything.
yes, yeah.
And I have seen them drop below the calling frequency. So let's say they're at 14,210, up 5 to 10. Sometimes they'll go back down to, oh 08 and then start moving up. So there's a key here that we're going to talk about later, but it has something to do with listening. So
And Bill, I'm an ICOM, big ICOM guy, and I've got a 7610 that I'm looking at here now. So on my frequencies, like on 20 meters, for example, I can push that button 3 different times. And every time it jumps 5 kcs. So what I do on some D expeditions when I'm listening to these guys now, and I've done this on D expeditions when I was out, but I would start like at 14,200, and then I would set my next one at 14,205, and then 210. And all I have to do is just hit that button to change my frequency. I'm really not tuning so much.
okay, that's great. That's a great point. I guess you could do the same thing with memories, right?
Yes,
If you're going, but that usually takes some time to set up. I never thought about that. That's a good
yes.
idea. So one thing that I do is I have split enabled all the time, even if it's something easy and there is no split, I just have it on. That way I can instantly, move up a little bit. Um, there was a example you gave one time. I believe it was for Scarborough Reef and James Brooks, right? So can we
Yes,
talk about that for a minute?
sure. So I need a Scarborough Reef for an all-time new one, the last time they were up. And I'm listening to the operator. He was at 14,200. And he's listening 5 to 15 up, and I'm just going up and down like everybody else, trying to figure out his method of operation and trying to find a clear spot. And then all of a sudden, while I'm listening, the operator says go to 258. And I'm thinking to myself, man, that was awful strange. Why did that guy say 258? He did not say 14,258 because we were on 20 meters, but he said 258. So I go up to 14,258. I made one call and worked that guy for a brand new one. And that was the only and the last time I ever heard Scarborough Reef.
Wow. Wow.
So it's any good operator will always tell you, listen, 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 listen. And that is just so true. We get excited and we fail to listen when we should be listening.
So when you're on the other end of, Midway and you're trying to give instructions and nobody listens, doesn't that frustrate the heck out of you as the DX operator?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is frustrating, and you'll come back and you'll hear a echo X-ray in the pileup. You'll hear echo X-ray. Well, you know that you heard that, and so you'll go back to the echo X-ray, and the pileup is just huge again. Everyone is just calling, and they all know that you're trying to work the echo X-ray station, but I guess out of being anxious, they just continue to call, and it is so frustrating. And normally, any good operator on any good D expedition, if he hears a partial of that call, in this example, echo X-ray, he won't give up until he works that guy because he knows that operator is there. And
Yeah.
so once he comes back to a station, then the rest of us need to be quiet for a minute.
Yeah, I've had several times where AJ8B has been translated to AJ8D, and
Yeah,
for the most part, when I hear that, if you immediately like, no, 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 here it is. It's Bravo, 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 and you're right. They will stay with you and they'll work with you. So
yes,
I've always been appreciative of that. I just can't imagine what it would be like to have, 8,000 people calling you at once. It's
yes.
just crazy.
Yeah, you have to have good ears and you have to have good patience. Most certainly, you have to have good patience.
Well, a couple of examples. We're going to switch gears for a minute and talk about filters, and this is the point where I think I've got a Flex 6400, but I know I only know 15% of it, and I had my FT 950 for years, and I know I only knew 20 or 30% of it. So it's when you start getting into filters that I think the radios start to really shine. This past weekend in the CQ Worldwide CW was a really good time. That's when I like to actually experiment and play around with filters. I don't want to do that when I'm trying to work Peter the First, but if I'm trying to work, Mayotte or someplace that, isn't rare but isn't common, it's a lot easier to test your filters. The one filter I use pretty much a lot, I guess, is a passband filter. And the idea behind that is it takes stuff above and stuff below your frequency you're listening to, and allows that to go through. And that's one that I would recommend you have. Also, the CW signals that I like to use, CW filters, I'm sorry, that I like to use. Once I can hear clearly, I don't want to throw a filter on and I miss the guy. But if I do something clear, I usually go down to about 400 hertz wide, and then I can kind of hear and I can make it out. The radio actually seems to almost like track with you. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I hear it. Yeah, okay. There's different APF and noise blockers and other stuff that all the different vendors have. But when you can really drill down on the narrow filters and take everybody else out, it just helps everything. Do you have any preference between RF gain or no RF gain or AGC? How do you use that?
No, I keep all mine at normal settings and do pretty much what you're talking about, Bill. Get the guy's signal in there and then use the filters to try to eliminate the side bands or the stations close to the interference as you
Okay.
have there.
Um, I think ICOM has this, but a lot of radios also have a notch filter. And the idea behind a notch filter is, let's say you have a very close signal that's just overpowering, like CQ Worldwide. Somebody's calling CQ right on top of me trying to work Toledo. Um, I can drop that notch filter on that guy calling CQ and he's gone. Now, the quality of the radio seems to be when you take him out, does it affect the signal you're listening to or not? And my old HW101 years ago, if I took out too much of the signal next to it, it would affect what I was listening to. But
Yeah.
that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So these notch filters are just excellent. What have I got? Oh, something called IF shift. Yeah, I forgot I wanted to mention that. IF shift, if you have that, is kind of cool because you can move the signal, you can move the lack of a better term, the frequency response area that the signal's passing through, if you will, to more take advantage of the characteristics of your radio. So if you have IF shift and use that in conjunction with passband, that's something you should be looking into because it really makes a difference. The one that I know that I use a lot that Flex has, I don't know if any other vendor has this, but it's something called a tracking notch filter. So let's say that all of a sudden the Russian woodpecker shows up And if no one's familiar with that, it's an irritating sound on the low bands. It's usually created by over the horizon radar. So I can put that tracking notch filter right on that. It'll blanket it. And then if that moves, the notch filter actually moves with it. So if it moves up 5 or down 3 or down 8, the filter will move with it and continue to blanket it out. I haven't used it to all the features that it has, but it's a very, very effective filter. The point is behind here is I've tried to identify, and most of this was from J K4ZLE. I've tried to identify just the key filters that most of us have and most of us should attempt to use. But I'm telling you, guys have been doing this for 20 years. Don't go as in depth as a radio perhaps as they should. So make sure you're taking a look at splits and filters. So I have a general guideline when I use different things. And Joe, you can comment on this. When I'm on the low bands, if the static's really high, I like to use the RF gain to kind of just back that down. The CW filter, honestly, I use all the time because my hearing's not as great as it could be. But specifically, when you're trying to work a very weak signal, it's good to narrow that down. Do you use a speech processor at all in any of your sideband work, Joe?
No, not
Yeah.
really. No,
Okay. I don't either. I never have. I don't know why. I just
no.
never have. But a speech processor, if you have it, it's something you're going to lock into. Something called a pan adapter, or we call it a waterfall display now. Um, 7 or 8 years ago, that was not common. And now every radio you buy has it. And boy, talking about finding open frequencies and open, calling areas, that pan adapter is terrific. A second receiving antenna. Joe, tell me, just take a minute, Joe, and talk about a second receiving antenna at your station, like a beverage, for instance. How much do you benefit from that?
Yeah, I really like my beverage antennas. So a beverage for the listeners is this a excuse me, a long wire. All mine are about 500 to 600 feet long. They're terminated at the end, the direction that you want to listen to, with a 500 ohm resistor. And I use these constantly. I've got four different directions, obviously, and I also have a magnetic loop receive antenna. So some radios, if like a 7300, ICOM 7300 does not have a receive port, antenna port, but my 7610 does. So, excuse me, if I'm listening into trying to work a fella in Africa, I put on my receive beverage for Africa, and the signal really, really goes down. And if you can get rid of the noise on the low bands, if you can get rid of the noise, there's nothing left but the guy's signal. So the more you can eliminate that noise, the better you're gonna hear him. And I use mine all the time, all the time.
And again, you're not talking about erecting a tower or,
No,
$1,000 with aluminum. You're talking about a couple of 100 feet.
yes, and mine are 4 feet off of the ground. I used to have them 8 feet in the air, and then when a friend of mine told me to start building them 3 to 4 feet off of the ground, and I really like 4 feet, and I'm sort of out here in deer country, and our deer and some of the bucks with big racks, and they'll walk up to that wire and they either duck underneath it or they jump over it. But knock on wood, I've never had a deer taking one of these 4 foot beverages down. It amazes me. We see them every day going either jumping over or leaning down going under these antennas, but they're good antennas. And if you have a small city lot, I always tell people if you can put up 100 foot beverage, it's better than a 50 foot beverage. And 200 would be better than 100. 400 or 500, 600 would be ideal.
Do,
But
do you
sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
do you think the deer, when you transmit, you're running so much power that the the beverage glows maybe because it's in the same field?
I I never thought about that, but I'll look out
You
after
know,
this podcast
yeah,
because
that
it's
that
dark
could
here
be it,
now.
That very well could be it. Let's see. An RX not a receive notch filter whenever you need to get it, just to get rid of a constant carrier tone. It still drives me nuts when guys will come right on top of a DX station and they'll tune up. I don't
Yeah,
get it. I want to
it's
just
amazing.
reach in the pocket and ship them a dummy load. I just
Yeah, yeah.
now here's three. We're going to switch gears. and I'd like your opinion on three different operating techniques. Okay. So the first one is something called, well, all three of them are tail ending, partial calls, and timing. And they all have a couple of characteristics in common. You got to be able to hear the other station. And I hear guys calling and calling and calling, and they can't hear them. Or when they finally work them, they'll have their call wrong because they haven't been listening. Or they'll struggle, and then they'll give them a 599. It's like, okay, something's not right here. You couldn't hear them, and you want to tell them how strong they are. But anyway, you got to
Yeah.
be able to hear the other station, and you have to practice these things. You just can't. And I'll get into what these are, but tail ending, partial calls, and timing, you just can't get on and do it. You got to practice it. And to be honest, and this is really what I want to know from you, Joe, some DX stations just don't appreciate these sometimes. So let's get into them for a minute. What is tail ending? Well, an example of tail ending might be if my friend K1FJ were working the P5, Frank said, "Okay, thank you, 59 Ohio." And at the very end of him saying Ohio, I throw in my call, AJB. And now P5DX heard that, and he says, "Okay, K1FJ, thank you, AJB, go ahead." So tail ending works sometimes. The problem I see, if you're in a pileup and everybody starts doing that, you're negating any progress. Joe, what do you think?
Yes, exactly. Because the operator at that point, all these stations, and it seems like millions, but it could be several, it could be 100 for sure. But all of a sudden, the operator is now listening to 100 stations calling, and he's lucky to pick out anything. It is not easy for the DX operator.
Yeah, so whether it's a full call or not, if they're all blasting in. So again,
Yes,
we're maybe the better approach is that space versus just tail ending.
yes,
So partial calls. Well, partial call is kind of the same as I just described, but in my case, I hear K1FJ finish with the P5, and instead of throwing out my call, I might just yell 8 Bravo. I might just do that because that's quicker. It gets a little information out, and then I hope the P5 comes back and says, "Hey, who is the 8 Bravo?" But Joe, what do you think of this? And then tell me about Wayne. Wayne had an interesting experience with partial calls, if I recall, in Somalia.
yeah. On the 8 Bravo, years ago, we used to do that. Echo X-ray, 8 Bravo, Charlie Whiskey. And years ago, we got away from all that because it just didn't seem to work out. If you have the whole call, then Alpha Japan 8 Bravo, we can pick something out of that call. The DX operator can pick something out where he can come back and partially identify that call sign. So that always seems to work, but it's better to give that full call sign because we have a better we can hear more of those letters to pick out that particular call.
Okay.
Uh, Getting back to Wayne, what was the
So didn't he? You guys were over at like six Oscars somewhere, and somebody just
yes,
kept
yes.
yelling 8 Bravo, and he finally said, "Okay, you're in the log. Now leave me alone."
Oh yeah, yeah, he got it. And then one time we was in Montenegro putting
That's
it
it.
on as a new country, and it this Wayne, poor fellow's passed away, but an excellent operator. It was in the middle of the night, and the pileup was getting a little ruly, and he says we're going to go by numbers because we used to do that, W1s, W2s, and so forth. And so Wayne says we're going to go by numbers, and he says anybody over 85 call now. So so that was a little, but there was a guy that did call. He was over 85 and he called. Wayne worked him. Yeah.
Yeah,
It puts a little fun into the D expedition to settle your nerves down.
I remember when we used to do that by call area. So it was like, okay, I'm
Yes.
I'm K4ZLE. Now is he a 4 or is he an 8 because he lives in Ohio? So I guess in
Yeah.
his case he'd answer both, right?
Yeah. The pileups used to get so big years ago that we went by call areas, and then we would do the Caribbean and South America because there wasn't near as many operators in the Caribbean, Central South America. But for some reason we all got away from that. I'm not 100% sure why.
Well, I think it's because there's no real, where there's people live everywhere in the States. You used to have to change your call, right? And
Yes,
now you don't have to do
yes.
that. So,
Yeah, yeah. Years
um,
ago, if you was a one, you was on the Northeast, but
yep.
today you could be a one in Hawaii.
Yeah. So the final thing I want to talk about is timing. And I have found this to be, in addition to operating split, timing to me is just huge. It's just a great way. And I earned mobile DXCC and I had a rig in the car for about 3 years. And I can't tell you how much of a better operator that made me because I had to listen. I'm in 100 watts in a car with essentially a small vertical in the back of it. And I had to get very good at trying to get into pileups, but you can do it. And I was always very appreciative of those DXpeditions that every 10 or 15 minutes would stop for mobiles or QRP,
Yeah,
or whatever it was, right? So the
yeah,
idea behind timing would be, and I love to do this in a crowd because I'll usually have, and we did this at Western Kentucky, you have like, I'll point to one person and say, now you yell your call out when I point at you. And everyone else in that room, I want you to yell your call on a count of three. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, and 80 people all yell their call out. And then I point to the person and they go K4ZLE. And it's such a dramatic example of how important timing is. And I'm not talking about moving frequency or anything else. I'm just talking about let all those guys call and then maybe you can slip it in, right?
yes, yes, for sure. Yeah, timing is they're all important, don't you think, Bill?
Yeah, I think they do. They're all tools, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
sure.
I have heard DX stations say no partial calls, and if that's it, then you can't use that one.
That's right.
And sometimes I'll sit here and all of a sudden be like, oh, you got to start playing with the timing a little bit, or oh, gee, move up a little bit, move down. So you kind of get caught up, and
Yes,
that's the one thing about. And I'm an FT8 proponent, so no big deal here, but these kinds of things you don't really use as much with FT8. And there is a certain amount of satisfaction of using 100 watts or something and breaking a pile up by using techniques in your all the radios versus not. But that's not what I'm after. I'm just saying there's a little bit. So
yes,
another thing I want to touch on, and you and I've never talked about this. There's something called a list operation. And a list operation is basically a situation where you get an operator who has a better than average station, and he invites DX stations to call him. So maybe, Joe's sitting in Louisiana and he's got 15 different DX stations from all over the globe that have checked in. And then any of us that want to check into that net and call one of those, they can do that. What I have used that for, and I'll admit I've used it, um, is when I had a rig in the car, I'd never operated mobile like that before. So I thought, I wonder how this will work. So I found a net and I worked a ZL through the net. And it was like, okay, the ZL heard me in New Zealand. I heard him. We closed the. What people don't like about it is that the net operator himself might say, Bill, I don't think you got his call right. You better call again. There's some assistance that goes on there.
yeah,
Um, but I think for young hams, it's a great way to overcome microphone jitters because there's really no pressure, and you can use it to test out what you have. But like I said, not every ham favors this. What
yeah.
do you think?
Well, I did that for a good while, years and years ago. And I can't tell you today, guys, why I decided to do that. But anyway, Bill was correct. I would get on and I would hear a VK on. I need Australia for a new one. So I would get in and I would get in line on the list operation and work the guy. And occasionally, Bill, you're right. I would hear the net operator trying to help some poor guy make a contact, but he would he definitely would try to help the station get through, and I never did think that that was real fair, but I never thought that it was a daily practice.
Yeah.
So maybe it wasn't so bad, but maybe it wasn't so good either.
Well, I have to admit, I've heard, basic, hey, you might want to call again, or you might, but I've never heard the list operation close the QSO. So
Yes.
it's all legal. I mean, there's no, it's just
Yeah.
more of an approach. But
And
I would really recommend it if anybody, is concerned about microphone jitters or getting nervous. It really is a great way to overcome that. And again, like I said, as soon as I got the rig in the car, I thought I wondered what this can do. And I worked New Zealand that first day. I thought this is going to be a lot of fun. So,
yeah. So did they still have these list operations? Because I don't hear them.
yeah, there are.
Okay.
Do I hit? Wait a minute. Let me look. No, I thought yeah, there's a few out there. The other list operation I've heard recently is there's a 80 meter states list. So if
Oh,
you need North Dakota on 80 meters or whatever, and I know
yeah.
there's a county hunters list.
Okay.
So, but if someone's interested, they can search DX list, and so
I'm
now I got
looking.
a whole bunch of different things to bounce off of you. So hopefully everybody's hearing this. They're not bored. They haven't shut us off. So here's a whole bunch of different things. So let's say you're home for a week. You got a week home. It's a staycation. The weather's horrible. So you're going to stay inside. And you've decided, okay, I'm going to go try to find some all-time new ones. So the example I used, and this worked for me, it was a couple years ago, but it's a good example, was 9 Victor. I had not worked Singapore before. So the first thing I did for the week I was off is I went to the ng3k.com website. And if you go to that website, he's got a very nice table that lists all of the current and upcoming and projected DXpeditions. And you can search by country or by prefix. So in my case, I went out and said, is there anything going on with 9 Victor? And I looked, and of course, as it would figure, the weeks that I was off, there was no 9 Victor DXpedition. And you wouldn't really expect a DXpedition to 9 Victor, but they might. Somebody might activate it. So then what I did is I said, okay, I've taken off some time right around CQ Worldwide. I don't know if you knew this, but you can go to cqworldwide.com/results, and you can look at the participants in, back 5, 10 years. So I went back 3 years and I said, okay, who participated in CQ Worldwide CW from Singapore, 9 Victor? And I found out that there were 3 stations that logged at least 300 QSOs each. So
Gee.
that made me feel pretty good. And I thought, okay, there's 3 stations that are going to be very active. Now, the thing to understand is this is just the stations that actually submitted their log. There may have been
Oh.
50, but just casual guys that were in and out, but these 3 at least submitted their logs. So I knew that I felt like, okay, 9V is going to be active in CQ Worldwide. And one thing, Joe, and I'd like you to talk about this a little bit, no matter what your plan is during the contest, no matter what your plan is on a daily basis to get on the air, don't forget the gray line. What does that mean and how big is it?
Well, the gray line is a big thing, or at least it is to me. I'm on the gray line twice a day. For sure, first thing in the morning.
So
So,
what is the gray line?
well, the gray line is the termination between daylight and darkness. And I've always found that during that gray line, which is about an hour period, I think, is the your signal is enhanced because of this gray line. So I'll get on early in the morning and I'm sitting here and I might be on 160 or 80 or whatever. And I'm always waiting for that gray line and I'm sitting there like a cat waiting on a mouse and waiting for some good DX to come in. So I like the gray line. I only use it mainly on 30, 40, 80, and 160, 60 meters also because I'm a 60 meter guy. And I found out um, a lot of people said that it has nothing to do with 6 meters. But I have worked on many stations because I have one monitor that's on the gray line 24/7 here running. And I'll work someone, for example, in Norway, and I'll look up at my gray line map, and that guy will be right at the gray line because my logging program puts a little box where the operator is, the DX operator I'm working. So I really like the gray line. I really encourage everyone to read up on it and see if it works for you like it does for me.
So Carl Lashislav, is it K9LA? Is that Carl?
Yes,
That doesn't sound right. But
yes.
anyway, Carl, I asked him a couple years ago exactly how does it work. And he basically said you have one band in the ionosphere who normally absorbs signals that hasn't been created yet, and you've got another one that enhances signals, and that hasn't gone away yet. So the conjunction of the effect of both of those is that it really enhances signals. And I've been surprised because you will hear them go up, several
Yes,
dB and stay there for a bit of time and then drop down.
yes,
So,
yes.
have you also found that the gray line's effective even at when sunspots are just dead?
Yes, I like it at all times. I'm just a gray line guy, and I just like it. Sometimes I miss it in the evening if the wife and I, go out for dinner. But um, I really encourage people to read up and monitor that gray line.
We may have to get some sort of an ICOM remote interface for you so you don't miss them when you're at dinner. I mean, she's a ham, she'll understand.
That's right. Yes, she will.
One tip that I got from somebody, and I don't know who it was, um, if you know what it is you need, and I would encourage you, no matter what your logging program is, print out or review on your screen what you need. Because just a few years ago, I was trying to hit 200 on 40 meters, and I went down. I said, "What do I need?" My God, I don't have Romania confirmed. And I went out and looked. I'd worked Romania 50 or 60 times. I never had them confirmed. I couldn't believe it. And I don't know why. So, anyway, you got to know what you need. But I was working Alaska, and someone had given me the tip, hey, um, you should ask him for another band. I said, well, how do you do that? So I worked him on 40, and I asked him, hey, in Morse code, I said 59904 and then 80 meters question mark. And they responded with, wait a minute. And they must have turned and asked, Joe, where you at? And he said 3503. I said, thanks. And I QSY. And sure enough, I got him. And
Yeah.
just randomly hearing Alaska on 80 meters wouldn't have been, nearly as quick. But I asked them and they told me where to go. They didn't mind because they wanted it on 80 meters. They liked my call and I got them. So don't be shy, I guess is the rule there. If you need them, ask them.
Bill, you know what I do a lot of times, like if I needed the same scenario and I needed this guy on 80 meters and I have worked him on other bands, or if I just see him on a packet cluster, I will send him an email and ask him, tell him that I really need him bad for a band fill for 80 meters. Can we have a schedule? And I don't know that I have ever been refused because all hams want to help other hams.
Yeah.
That's just the way we are.
Dave Minster uses a great analogy and NA2AA. He said, if you were dropped down in the middle of Yugoslavia and you're in a ham and you're just wandering around and you go up and knock on people's door, they probably wouldn't answer. But if you're a ham and you walk up to a house that had a quad and you said to the guy, hey, I noticed your quad, all of a sudden you're in there having dinner and working DX. And
That's
that
right.
and that's really true. It's
Yes,
really true.
yes.
All right, let me see what else I got here. Oh, here's one of my favorite. Check the WARC 79 bands during a contest. There's a lot of DX that really doesn't want to get into pileups. So since the WARC bands, and I'm talking about 12, 17, and 30 basically, um, they become very active during big contests. And the one that comes to mind is Brian, 9J2 BO. Brian Otter, I think is his name. And there's a lot of DX that goes on those bands because people aren't there, right? They're all on the major bands. So I
Yes,
love to keep my eyes open on the Work 79 bands because they're easy to work when you do that.
yes, yes, for sure.
So another hint, I guess, that I would recommend, and I don't use this as much as I used to, but I used to rely on this in the car, and that's the NCDXF beacon network. So the beacon network, there's I don't know, approximately 20 beacons all around the world, geographically spread around, and each one in sequence sends information at oh, and I got to look 100 watts, 1 watt, 100, 10, 1, and 100 milliwatts. So, for instance, if you go try to listen to there's one in Sri Lanka 4S7 Bravo at 14.100, and you hear it, maybe you hear it 100 watts and you can't hear it at anything else. So it's a great way to use your radio to tune around and try to see what's open into what part of the country. There is an NCDXF beacon app that you can put on your phone. And I used to sit in the parking lot at work and let the car warm up for a minute, and I would get on that beacon app and find out that, oh, it looks like on the drive home, 17 meters is going to be my best shot, or 10 meters, or 15, whatever it happened to be. And that's the way I would go. So I would recommend getting familiar with the NCDXF beacon network. It's just another thing that the NCDXF does, which makes them a very valuable part of what we do, and well worth your money.
Yes.
So to kind of somewhat wrap things up, I'd like to make it easy, because I've had, Joe and I've done this podcast almost 4 years now, and I get a lot of different questions like, man, how can I get the 340, and how hard is it to get the 340? And my take is let's get the first 100, and then let's get the second 100, and then let's get the third 100, and then let's get the final 40, because the old adage is, how do you eat an elephant? Well, you eat it a bite at a time, right? You can't eat the whole thing. So again, Jay, K4ZLE, he presented one time on, he called it, I believe, collecting the weeds. So if you've got this giant garden and you've got to get it refined, you don't go through it and immediately just take every weeds out of this corner and every weed out. You go through and you get the really obvious weeds and you get them out. And then you come back and do a second pass through it. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. But I'll throw out some ideas, Joe, and you tell me what you think. So we're going to talk about level one. So this is that first 100 countries, okay? There's a couple of resources out there for you. No matter what, don't be timid. And it's easy to get timid when you hear guys that are really fast, and you hear guys that are really loud, and you can barely hear the station. It's easy to get timid. Um, I would certainly encourage you to embrace CW at some point. There are things like cwops.org that have a huge amount of tools, and a CW Academy that help you get on board. The Long Island Morse Code Group, they're terrific. There's something called DX University, and that is literally dxuniversity.com. And there's some great slides and presentations out there. And I would encourage you to find an Elmer, something like I did with Joe and Jay and Dave KTV. So I think that's really important. And there's been a number of times where I'll just call Joe and say, man, I've not been able to get Montserrat, and I don't know why. I can't seem to break through, and we'll talk about it a little bit. Um, and that helps. The other thing I would really encourage you to do is find a good club and join it. There's a couple that come to mind. The North Alabama DX Association, they're really good, and they got a great newsletter. The Southwest Ohio DX Association, we have a great newsletter. We got a great club, got solid presentations every month. We host the DX dinner at Hamvention, and also the DX Expedition of the Year. I'm also a member of Twin City DX Association, and they are just a group of high-level dedicated DXers. And we already mentioned the Northern California DX Association. And this is a group that if you cleaned out your car and found $20 in change between that and your couch, I would mail that to NCDXF. I mean, they apply that money and they really get a lot out of it. And then also INDEXA. Joe and I have a very good friend, W8HC, Howe, who's very involved with INDEXA, and he loves it, and it's a great organization. So all of these things will help you work that first 100 and then jump to the next 100. Above all, have fun. Have fun with it. How important is that, Joe?
Oh my God, yeah. If you're not having fun, you're probably not going to do it. And I've been a ham 55 years. I've been on the air just about every day out of that 55 years. And if I was not having fun, I probably would have given it up years ago. So you
Yeah.
got to get in there and make it fun.
If we already talked, another thing you need to do is start to learn the gray line. Know when propagation changes, how and why, what effect does weather and sunspots have. Okay, here's another one we already talked on. Learn your rig, splits and filters. And I would really encourage you to read. And I've got a couple of really excellent things I'll highlight. There's a book called DX 101 by AC6V. And I got a copy of that. It's terrific. There's another one called The Complete DXer, and that's out of print, but that's by Bob Locker, W9KNI. And just sitting down and having him go through his entire year of DX, it just gets you excited, and you're going to want to get a radio and listen. and then all of the different newsletters I mentioned as well. And I will have all these things noted in the show notes. So now we've got our first 100. So congratulations to y'all. Now you get to the second level when you want to get between 100 and 199. And this is where you start paying a little more attention to your antennas. Like Joe mentioned, an additional receive antenna, maybe a small amplifier. We just sat through a presentation by Glenn Johnson, W0GJ, and it was entitled, "Is 3 dB more worth a divorce?" And his argument was, you can get a moderate amplifier that'll get 800 to 1,000 watts, and you'll get that for a moderate cost. A lot of them are used. Or you can go the next level and get one that does the full legal limit, but for twice or three times the price, you're not getting that much more signal out of it. So it's probably not worth it, but it's well worth the research. Headphones. I really don't do anything anymore with headphones. Now, part of it is I'm older. Part of it is I'm in a room in the basement, but I use headphones for everything. Our friend K0MD has said basically you can't get to the honor roll or even the 300 club without multi-modes. So you got to know CW, sideband, RTTY, FT8, the whole bit. Know your equipment. Again, I'm going to reiterate that. Your split is critical and filters are really, really important. Know who is on and when. So a really excellent website is the WA7BNM website. It's contestcalendar.com. And he has, I mean, every weekend there's contests going on. And a lot of times I'll hear the activity and I'll wonder, wow, there's a bunch of Romanians on. I'd love to work Romanians on, 40 meters or whatever it is. I wonder what contest this is. So I'll go to his website and sure enough, oh yeah, look at that. There's the Romanian DX contest or something. So again, the WA7BNM website is excellent. Resources, DX clubs, DX forums, read. This is where you start looking at things like the Daily DX, which is a publication from Bernie, W3UR, and you get real-time DX information. And that's really important because I know recently the 3 Charlie 0 Whiskey guys, they had to cancel that. And there were that DXpedition, and there were a lot of guys sitting around waiting to get on the air. And there
Yeah.
was a lot of us that got an instant email from Bernie saying, hey, the whole thing's been scrapped, details later, and then I can go do something else. Likewise, there's been times where someone has shown up in a country and they'll call Bernie and say, hey, I'm at Mayotte. I'm only going to be here for 12 hours. And Bernie will send that out to everybody that he subscribes to. So
Yeah.
that kind of information is really, really important. Let's see. Now, if we jump to level three is kind of the top end. So we're talking about you've confirmed 200. Congratulations to y'all. You got 200. Now we're getting a little bit better at this. You start looking at things like enhanced headphones and DSP speakers and tailored microphones that stress high frequencies and they roll off low frequencies. And I'll tell you what's interesting about tailored microphones. I don't know his call, and if I did, I wouldn't repeat it. But there's an Italian ham, and every year in the CQ Worldwide Single Sideband Contest, he must have his wife or a young lady record his call sign. So what you'll hear very loud and clear, CQ Worldwide, I0KAM. So you hear him. So you work him and he'll come back, oh, 59 AJP. It's like, whoa, what happened? But
He
he has
fished
used,
he fished you in.
he did, but he's
Yeah.
used her voice in the tailored microphone and stuff. And you hear it. There she is. She's loud and clear.
Yeah.
So you're starting to refine everything. You're starting to get better at what you're doing. No tune amplifiers, full power amplifiers, long duty cycle. I will give you my caution on long duty cycle. I've recently heard of a number of guys who have bought, really nice smaller amplifiers. They were happy with it, and then they tried to run FT8. And FT8 is a big duty cycle, so meaning it's turned on for a bit of time. And amplifiers don't always like that. There used to be, and was it Alpha Joe that had the brick sitting on the keyer out at
Yeah.
Hamlet?
Yes.
And they
Yes.
would run that amplifier for hours.
Hours.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So long duty cycle, if you're considering an amplifier, just take that into account.
Yeah.
So level 3 summary, all modes, all bands, all tactics. So this is where you're saying, I got to work at this guy in the log. When is he? When do I think he's going to show up? When has he been in my area? Has he been on before? I've even sent emails out to our club saying, hey, I'm really looking for the 9 Victor tonight. Has anybody worked him? Or when you work them, you volunteer that. And you make your checklist of things. And I'm a checklist guy. I got a little, well, heck, I got a little list right here that says, for this band, you want to use this tuner, and for this band, you want to use just the straight amplifier.
Yeah.
And then longevity is really important because you got to stay at this for a long time. And a good example of that is coming up. Peter the First and Bouvet. When those come on, it'll be approximately, what, 10 years since a previous
Yes.
full-time active
Yes.
de-expedition, right? So
Yes.
some of these are only on every 8 or 10, and some never come back again. There's some argument about which ones from the National Fish and Wildlife, Curie Island, and some of those things.
Yeah.
Um, so I often tell our listeners that if you hear them and you even think you have a little interest in DX, work them now.
Yeah.
Because 5 or 8 years from now, when you get hot on DX, you're going to be mad you didn't. I can guarantee it.
Yeah.
Now, antenna becomes pretty important. So there was a survey done a couple years ago that I'll share with you. The ARL did a survey of the general ham population, and they said, hey, what kind of antennas do you have? And 24% of the respondents had a multi-band vertical. So a quarter, right? 20 of multi-band vertical. And that's what I have, and I've had for years and years. And then the 425 DX News newsletter surveyed their DX News readers, and they found that 52% of their readers used a beam or a Yagi, and only 16% used a vertical. So there's a bit of a difference. Again, when you get into that 300, you need to move from a multi-band vertical, which radiates and hears equally in all directions, to a beam or a Yagi, which would be more focused and have maybe a better takeoff angle and the ability to move it around.
Mhm.
Does that surprise you at all, Joe?
Yes, because I'm a beam Yagi guy and a vertical, and I've got some dipoles. But yes, I'm really surprised that the general population did not have more beams.
So we've talked about these 3 different levels, and I think now it's important to say what is common to all of them. Well, I can tell you, I've been told before, work them first and confirm them later. So you hear P5 on the air, P5 stroke WAGEX, and you don't think he's supposed to be there, you're going to work him. And then you'll find out later he is, or he's with the State Department, he was allowed to operate, or you didn't, and or you worked him and you throw that QSO away.
Yeah.
So work them first, confirm them later. QSL cards, LOTW is a great tool for that. And again, we talked about software, DX Lab or similar. Use clusters, to watch DX, watch propagation. Various contests you can get involved in, and some are big time contests like CQ Worldwide, and others are state QSO parties. And state QSO parties are great opportunities to really get in and kind of see if you're competitive. One of my favorites, the Ohio QSO party. I love that thing. So,
Yeah.
um, but anything you can do to get on the air and stay on the air for extended period of time to allow yourself to learn your rig, to learn propagation, and to learn how this works is really important. Now, I do have a silver bullet, and this silver bullet to me, it makes a difference um, that is second to none. So I usually ask the audience, what is the number one component needed to break up a pileup? Is it running full power? Is it to have this fabulous, great receiver? Is it to have a great antenna and a ton of aluminum in the air? Well, if you do the survey, which I did, and I have interviewed over 63 DXers for our club newsletter, and I ask them, what do I need to do to break your pileup? And 57 of the 63 stress that listening is the number one skill needed to break a pileup. And Joe, we talked about this a bunch earlier. Listen, 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 and listen again.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, we just cannot emphasize that enough.
So did I miss anything?
Boy, I don't think so, Bill. You did a good job.
Well, we tried.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been a good podcast. I really enjoyed being your partner
Well,
tonight.
good. I appreciate it. Maybe we'll do it again on coin collecting or something.
Let's hope so.
But I hope everybody else enjoyed it. It's kind of our way of just throwing out information and hoping some of it stick. And what I really hope is that we've got some listeners that'll email us and say, "Hey, you guys forgot this," or "Hey, have you ever tried this?" Or and I'd love to have that happen because we want this to be a learning experience.
Yeah,
Uh,
this is one piece of advice I think that it always worked for me is if you get any free time where we're all busy, particularly if you're young and have a family and you go on the ball games and all this stuff with the kids, but all your free time, if possible, get on the air. If it's for 15 minutes, that's great. An hour would be better. And just keep doing that to get in the notion and get into the practice of listening and seeing what everyone else is doing. And then that will make you a great DXer.
One thing I should mention, I guess it's a selfish plug, but we've had the representative on from CW Ops. We've had somebody on talking about 160. We've had Carl on a couple of times talking about propagation. We've had numerous de-expeditions. So if you really want to learn about more of this and you want to drill down, go back and look at our back catalog because we've had some great stuff out there.
Yes.
But in addition, if we miss something, let me know. TheDXMentor@gmail.com. We'd love to cover it and get it out there for you. So that's it from Waynesville, buddy.
Well, thank you much, Bill, from Oxford, Ohio. It's
Yep,
been a pleasure and good DXing to everybody.
everyone. And I hope everybody had a good holiday with plenty of turkey and DX.
Bye bye.
Thanks, buddy. See ya. Well, I hope you learned at least one thing from this episode. Joe and I really had a blast talking about DX and hints and tips. We may have to do that again. Thank you for joining us on this edition of the DX Mentor. I would like to thank our sponsors, ICOM America, the Daily DX, DX Engineering, and the Southwest Ohio DX Association. You won't find anyone more committed to DX than these sponsors. And I would also like to thank my guest and typical co-host, Joe, WAGEX. He did a great job. I would love to have your feedback, answer your questions, and provide help with any DX or amateur radio issues that you may have. If you need clarification on something or you just have a question, email me at thedxmentor@gmail.com. I would especially like to thank you, our listeners and viewers. Without you, there would be no reason to do this. Please drop me a line if you have achieved an all-time new one, receive recognition, or have a DX event that you would like us to mention. We would be happy to do that. If you are enjoying these DX Mentor episodes, please hit the subscribe button. If you want to follow us to get updates on future YouTube and podcast episodes, as well as DX events and DXpeditions, join the DX Mentor Facebook group. And don't forget, every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. or 1300 Zulu, I drop the This Week in DX to give you 7 days worth of upcoming DX, all courtesy of Bernie, W3UR. 7-3 for this episode, and thanks to my ex-wife Karen for her love and support. I hope to see you in the pileups.